Hi, my name is Shannon. I'm a young adult librarian with Pikes Peak Library District, and today we're going to be showing you how to make tassels that you can then put on a long garland. Now, the only things you'll need for this are a pair of scissors and some yarn. I've got a couple of different choices in color here, so I'll be mixing them up and showing them how to start with a tassel and then what you can do to string them along a garland so that you have something that you can hang up in your room or anywhere else you might want to hang it. Let's get started. All right, so in order to make a tassel, you have to cut several pieces of yarn. This is a bunch of yarn, then folded in half and secured here at the base. We'll be using a macrame wrap knot that is really useful for holding it and also keeps it looking nice and pretty. So, with your tassels, you can decide on a variety of lengths or even thicknesses. You don't have to make them all the same length like this, or you don't have to make them the same thickness. You can really experiment with what you want. So I'm gonna measure out about this much, which is about an arm span for me. And I'm just gonna keep cutting at my yarn and pulling at it until it's the thickness that I want. Now, while I'm using yarn, you could use other fabrics or even really shiny reflective tassel paper or tinsel, anything like that, to make these tassels. How you might knot them at the base like that might be a little bit different, but this is pretty basic for making a tassel, and it's a really quick way to introduce some decoration into your wall. Now, you'll notice that some of my strings may not be exactly the same. Once you've secured your tassel, you can trim them to make them look a little more even and pretty. Now, I can look at it and I can decide whether or not I want this thickness to be what I want it to be. It's really not as thick as the other one that I did, so I'm gonna cut a little bit more. So now that I have the thickness that I want, I can smooth these out just a little, and then I'm gonna bunch it so that I have a hole here, and I'm gonna secure it right about here. So I'm gonna keep a hold on that. All right, now the macrame knot that we are going to do, we only need a little bit of yarn for it. So I'm gonna put this down here, maybe do half a wingspan. So then when I make this knot, I'm going to have a hold of my project up here. I'm gonna place a little bit of the yarn here, like this. Then I can pull up and wrap around and around, and you keep wrapping until you think you've got enough of your little winded knot, and then you can pull your string through the loop down here at the bottom. And I'm going to do a close-up of this so that you can see it a little bit better. Once you've pulled the string through your loop here, this remaining string that you had up here, you're going to pull up, and it will secure your decoration. And you have a tassel. You just trim off the extra bits here so that it looks a little clean. Here. And there. That's one tassel done. Now for trimming them to make them look neater, you'll notice I have a lot of raggedy edges down here. I'm just gonna find a length that I like, that all of the strands have in common. So I think right about here is where I will cut. And I'm gonna cut it off, and then tassel is much neater on the bottom. Any excess yarn you can save for other art projects, though this is just tiny little scraps. I'll probably discard it. Now I'll re-show you the knot at the base with another tassel. So here you can see that we have the start of one tassel and the line that we are going to secure it with, line being yarn. So we're going to group up our yarn like this. You're going to put an end up here, and this yarn is a different color, not only because it makes it look more dynamic on a garland, but also so you can see what I'm doing. Now we want a little bit of line here. We're going to pull up to create a loop, and we're going to wrap around and around and around. And we're going to keep this loop down here, and you can see the thread up there. But as we do this, we're making a line of rope. Now I've reached the end of my thread here, so I'm going to pull it through this loop, just like that. And then we're going to pull right here. And this is going to secure our knot, just like that. And you have a tassel. And like I did earlier, we're going to trim these edges so they're not hanging. Now all that's left to do is trim down here so that it is all nice and neat. So I think I'm gonna cut about there. And we can pull it like okay. And you have a nice tassel. Now this one is shorter than the others, so I can use it to kind of create some dimension as I'm laying them out on the garland. Now, while you may have a bunch of tassels for your garland, you may want to decorate it with some other things. You can always tape cut shapes of paper onto your garland, or if you wanted to, you could even make something like a pom-pom like you would if you were crocheting or knitting a hat. Now making a pom-pom is also super easy, just like a tassel, and I'll show you how to make one of those. Now there are several different ways to make pom-poms. There are pom-pom makers that you can get at a craft store like Michael's or Hobby Lobby, but you can also just use your hand or even the tines of a fork. Now I'm gonna make my pom-pom really big, so I'm gonna wrap it around 4 fingers. And you're just gonna keep wrapping and wrapping and wrapping, and it's gonna be really, really thick. Now pom-poms come in a variety of sizes. We'll be making ones that are about this big, which is only about 1.5 inches wide, I would say, maybe 2. So we keep on wrapping and wrapping and wrapping and wrapping and wrapping. You may not like this method because it feels like it's squeezing your fingers the more you're doing it, but as long as you're not wrapping tightly, which I'm not, I can still wiggle my fingers, you're okay. Wrap, wrap, wrap. All right, now I think this is probably good. So I'm going to cut right there, and I'm going to pull this off of my fingers. Now we want to keep it just like this, and we're gonna lay it on the yarn that we were wrapping with. And I'm just gonna cut just a little bit. And then what we're going to do is we're going to tie a knot. And you are going to cinch it down the middle, and you're gonna try and do it as tight as possible. Hold it, turn it around, and you are going to also tie a knot on the other side. Second knot on the other side to secure it fully. Now this doesn't look like a pom-pom, but what we're going to do is we're going to take our scissors and we're going to slip them through the loops of our design, of our little pom-pom, and we're gonna cut. Now, right here, I just missed a tiny little loop. So you're gonna look for that, fix it. Any other loops? Nope. And then we're gonna do the same thing on the other side. And I just trimmed those tied pieces so that they will blend into our poof, our little pom-pom. In the scissors go, come through, and cut. Look for any ones that didn't get cut. There's a couple. There's one. And you have the start of a pom-pom. Here's a couple I missed. Now it's just a matter of shaking it out, getting it like this. Oop, missed some others. And you've got a pom-pom. Now, to make them look nice and clean, you want to make sure all of your edges are the same length. So like right here, they're shorter here, but longer here. So we're going to kind of trim our pom-pom. And as we do that, they start to stick up just a bit more. Here's some really long pieces. Shake it out as you do it, and you can see where some of your pieces might be long. They're still a little floppy. And you have a pom-pom. This is perhaps not the prettiest one or the fuzziest one like this one, but as your ends start to fray out, they'll start to take up more volume and they'll stand up a little more. You can also do some of that yourself by grabbing the yarn string and unwinding it, since the yarn is wound of several threads. So there is a pom-pom. next step is assembling your garland. Now that you've finished your tassels and your pom-poms, it's ready to thread your garland. Now I'm going to be using a darning needle. It is a long needle that is used in yarn crafts with a large eye. It's perfect for putting things like yarn or really thick strands through. Now I'll be using regular yarn for my garland, but you can use other string. So I'm gonna thread my darning needle just so I'm ready for these pom-poms. This is where it's gonna be important. Now when I'm doing this, I'm going to pull a tassel through, and then I'm gonna set it up about where I want it. Which is about there, and I'm going to tie a knot here to secure it. Now you can tie 2 knots. And that is 1 tassel secured. Now, for your pom-poms, what you're going to do is take your darning needle and you are going to basically stab it through its middle. Now the pom-poms are nice and thick, so they're going to provide a lot of resistance and they're not going to slide on your yarn or thread too much. This is really great for keeping your tassels spaced out evenly, but also for if you had any decorations that might move around, like large wooden beads. And I'm gonna place it about there. Now, it's time for the next tassel. So I'm gonna push my needle through, just like I did. And I'm gonna make sure it's about the same distance as this one, so it needs to go in just a little closer. And it looks like, there we go. We're going to tie our knot. Now I'm going to tie with the darning needle thread side, which means I will have to pull the needle through. There's 1 knot. And there is 2. Now those 2 are secured. Now it's time for the other pom-pom. And again, we're just gonna pierce through the middle and pull it. You can look at it, it looks like maybe this isn't quite right, so we're gonna pull this just a little bit that way. And then last, we'll do our last tassel. Now I only have 3 tassels and 2 pom-poms for my garland, but you may decide that you want more on yours. That is totally fine. And since we aren't piercing any more pom-poms, I'm gonna get rid of the darning needle. We will set it out and check to make sure it's in the right spot, and we can tie to secure. Just like that. And all done. And there you have a simple garland. Thank you so much for joining me today as we made our own garlands using pom-poms and tassels. The library has a variety of resources for you, especially when it comes to yarn classes, books. So books on crochet that teach you how to make pom-poms like this, and even these tassels for any blankets or other things you might be making with yarn. You can find all of that at our website. Thank you for joining me today, and I will see you next time.